Good morning. Today is the fourth day of Elul, the 19th of August, I believe. No, that can't be. Is it? No, it's the 21st of August. Sorry. Let's go. Last time, on page 14, so we saw the difference between how Avraham knew Hashem, and he knew Hashem what we call indirectly, what we called knowledge, but he didn't recognize, meaning he couldn't recognize the essence itself. Only the appearances, only the revelation. And that was because Avraham was only privileged to see Hashem's revelation as creator, but not as the giver of the Torah. Okay? So because he didn't have the giving of the Torah, the experience of Har Sinai yet, so he did not yet have the recognition we called hakara versus yedi'ah. Okay. Let's read again. So according to this entire parable about recognition and knowledge, so we understand the difference between knowledge of God, which is the extension. Remember, we talked about etzem and itpashtut. So you see the itpashtut of the etzem into the lower worlds, the etzem, the essence of the infinite light, or Ein Sof. And this you can tell others. So all this he could transfer to his offspring. And that's the famous verse that God says, I've chosen him. Why have I chosen him? Because I know that he will instruct his offspring and they will follow the way of Hashem also. And that is all with knowledge. We said that this is what the instruction, this is the meaning, the identity of the lower aspect of God's four-letter name, which literally means he is the creator of worlds. And from the worlds, from what we see in creation, in nature, we can extrapolate back and understand the Creator. So it's not exactly extrapolation. We can logically follow back. We can understand the origin. It's not exactly extrapolation. I don't know what to call it. And this was what the patriarchs called Torah. And it's done in run and return. Right? Why is it run and return? We're not going to get into now. That's a whole discussion. We'll leave it for now. And that's what the sages mean when they say that Avram kept the entire Torah. So this is very very important, because if you read again, there's people who read what the Talmud says and say, oh, this is literal. They don't mean it literally. They never meant it literally. What they meant was that there's a certain instruction to it. Avram kept the entire Torah. What do I mean he kept the entire Torah? From his dealing with nature, he came to the same, let's call it, categories as the Torah. He understood the origin. He understood the origin. But he didn't have mitzvos. He didn't have the way that we understand it. Intuitively. His two, as the sages say, his two kidneys became his teachers. And this is what in Va'era, in Exodus 6, the pasuk, the verse there says, God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, I revealed myself with the name Kel Shakai to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Kel Shakai means with the power or the source of limits. And limits is exactly how the world creation was created, with limits. Limits on what? First of all, on God's infinite light, so that the world could be a vessel to contain something and it wouldn't completely shatter, because God's infinite light is too much for the world. So there had to be limits in the world. And beyond that, the laws of nature, which are all limited, all put limits on the behavior. You can't just float around, there is gravity and so on. But what he says to Avram, my name Havaya, meaning here, Hainu Havaya Dileila, talking about the higher aspect of God's four-letter name, Shuatzmut Or Ein Sof, which is the infinite light in and of itself, not the appearance of it, but it itself, שלמעלה מיות מקור לעולמות, which is above being an origin, a root, a source for the creation of the world, that aspect of mind, לא נודעתי להם שזהו גדר הכרה, איך שרק בעצם הנשמה נתפס אמיתת מציאותו, מה שאי אפשר לגלות בעולמות. Because this is what only the soul can perceive, and this is called recognition. There has to be, this is the difference between what the Baal Shem Tov calls worlds and souls. The worlds is a coming to appreciate God from creation. Souls means appreciating God through the inner essence of the person, through the soul. And the soul can recognize. It goes deeper because it recognizes something beyond what is in the world. And so what we mean, the higher aspect of God's four-letter name, which is represented by that. Of course, after that, there's another level called Elokut, called godliness itself. And above that, there is God himself. But we're not going to get into all that. כידוע במקום אחר, בעניין ולא בחוכמה ידיעה, שפירוש שאינו ידוע אפילו בדרך ידיעת המציאות מתוך התבוננות בעולמות. As we know that when the Zohar says, the Tikkunei Zohar says, he's wise but not in the knowable wisdom. What does knowable wisdom mean? God is wise but not with knowable wisdom. Knowable wisdom means not that he has some kind of other wisdom other than ourselves, but rather that the way that we understand wisdom is the wisdom that can be transferred from one person to another. That's just knowledge of wisdom. But God can also be known through recognition of wisdom, which is the higher wisdom, which can only be known by recognizing God's essence through the soul, and not through contemplating creation, nature. כי אם לנשמות ישראל מצד מתן תורה, and this can only be revealed, again, the higher aspect of wisdom can only be revealed to the souls of Israel thanks to Matan Torah, thanks to the giving of the Torah, שנגלה להם עצמות אור אינסוף בפנימיות נשמתם, ולכן מכירים מצד עצם היחידה את עצמות אור אינסוף. Because then, at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, that's when it was revealed to us what God's essence in and of himself, as it were, again, the essence that comes before the world, and we said that that's why the first commandment doesn't say, I am Havaya, your God, who created heavens and earth. Rather, it says, I am Havaya, your God, who took you out of Egypt. Because heavens and earth is Havaya as he's revealed through nature, and now we're at a higher level of revelation. Okay?
1 second, what about all these other people who said that they had connection with the Adam Arisha?
Yeah, all through nature, all through nature.
All these other,
right, you read any of these books.
Them and
No, same thing. But Avram reached a higher level of faith that he believed that there was something beyond nature. They didn't. No, they didn't know. They didn't go beyond. They were limited. Could be that Adam Rishon before he sinned. It could be that he had a higher level of recognition, that he had a soul. But then the souls, it says it like they fell from him like fruit falls from a tree. Neshirata neshamot. They mamish fell from him, and he lost his level. And certainly all the other tzaddikim, all the great people of the 10 generations until Noach, and then from 10 generations until Abraham, they had knowledge of God, but they didn't have recognition of God.
No?
Of course not. We say he's k'tana mana. He's of small faith, that he had no recognition of God. Avraham leapt over the limitations that are inherent in reality, in creation, through his faith. And that's why it says that God took him out. And what does Rashi say? He took him out. He took him above the stars. He took him above what they considered to be the rulers of the laws of nature, which in their time was astrology. So in their time, that was how they understood things. There's many things like that we don't see it that way because we have a more advanced point of view. I'm talking about even just technologically. Just talking to someone that I learned with in the morning about pulse. That you probably know this. There used to be a very well-established diagnostic method of feeling someone's pulse. I heard from my doctor, who's 70 now, who studied probably 40 years ago, 50 years ago, with someone who was old then. He said that in the 1920s, 1930s, they were taught 20, 25 different types of pulse. So what? And and certainly in previous ages we have documents that go up to 200 different types of pulses that people could distinguish the difference between. They could do diagnostics with them. So we talked about why don't we do this today? Because we don't need to. We have an echo. We do EEG. We don't need these things. We have a different way of doing this. And so you might say something was lost, but what we have is so much more exact than what they had. Anyway, let's continue. ואם שאינו ידוע מהותו, שהרי גם אם מתכנסים אינם יכולים לברוא אפילו כנף יתוש אחד. So even though we don't know God's essence, even when, even through Torah. No, I'm sorry, not even through Torah. The lower wisdom does not allow there to be what we call a recognition of the essence. That's what we kept saying. So because of this, he now says, there's a famous statement in the Talmud, that if all the people in the world came together, they could not create the wing of a single mosquito. Knaf yatush echad. What do we mean? So he says this is talking about the lower wisdom. With lower wisdom, you can't do these things. Meaning, from nature itself, to be able to create the wing of a mosquito, you can't do. It doesn't work. What do you need? You need the higher revelation. You need the Torah's revelation. Now why? Because today we would say it's not true. Here we're learning from nature. First of all, you can't know because now we're after Matan Torah. So it could be that it affected all the sciences at some level. But let's say it didn't affect. So today we can come together and we can now make, that there's genesis now. They're making organs and having the blood vessels form inside during the same time. That was the big limit on organ creation until now. But now they're making that. So you can't make a mosquito wing? I'm sure you could. You could print in 3D. The key here is that it says livro. Bria is yesh me'ayin. To create is ex nihilo, being from nothing. That we can't do. Because as much as you understand nature, you can't bring something out of nothing. You always have to have something from something. So you have a printer, so the printer has to have some material inside it. You do something else, you have to start with a culture. You have to start with something. To create, we can. But what the Torah does is it gives you the power to create. To literally bring something out of nothing. And where does that work? מכל מקום נקרא חוכמה ידיעה, כמו שכתוב, מה רבו מעשיך השם כולם בחוכמה עשית, והרי זה כמו למשל המסתכל בציור נאה ונפלא, אם שאינו מכיר חוכמה נפלאה, כי אינו יודע חוכמת הציור, אבל מכל מקום יכריחנו לדע מתוך הפלאת הציור שהאומן היה חכם עמוק בזה, אבל אינו יכול לדע מתוך הציור אם האומן היה חכם גם בחוכמות יותר עמוקים, מה שאינו שייך לציור כלל, עד שחוכמת הציור היה נחשב אצלו דבר פחות, אם לא כשמכיר את המצייר בעצמו, אז הוא יוכל לדע זאת. To create something from nothing requires recognition of the creator himself, to be one with him. And he says the example is, when you look at a painting, you're going to go to a museum in America. I hear that they have museums there. You'll go to a museum. They don't have electricity, but they have museums. So you'll go to a museum and you'll see this beautiful painting and you'll say, the person who drew this, he's an expert. I know that he knows painting. But you can't tell, is painting the only thing he knew, or does he know other things as well? And maybe even painting is the least of his talents. Right. So, we'll talk about that in a second. That's a great example. We talked about it last time also. So what does it mean? I don't recognize the essence. I don't know the person's essence. I don't recognize him. So I don't know from the painting what else he is. But you say the Maggid could look at a watch and he could tell that the person was blind in one eye. But that still is not the essence. Why is it not the essence? It's still extrapolation. And how did he know? Because Isai was very smart. He knew that when you in the old watches you had to wind the springs. So he says that when a person, all the rolling mechanisms in the body are all connected. Try to close your eyes hard. When you there's this thing. Try sneezing without closing your eyes. You can't. Why? Because it's the same type of muscles. So when these are fluctuating, they're contracting. So your eyes also contract. The same. And if you go further down, you'd see that the end of your digestive tract also contracts at the same time. Everything contracts. So he said that I knew he was blind in one eye. Why? Because if you're not blind, you have to hold your eye closed in order to see with one eye. He says he didn't have to do that. So he wound it exactly the right amount. But everybody else, they wind it too much because they have no control because they're closing their eye. They're shutting their eye, one eye, in order to look at the small spring. So that's still extrapolation. That's not, he doesn't recognize who and what the artisan is, the watchmaker. He doesn't know him. To know him means to be able to do what he does. Meaning if I have recognition, I can do what God did. I can create something from nothing. And with that, we'll send you off to America to create something from nothing. Because you recognize Hashem.
We find among the